Welcome to the Frontline podcast, brought to you in association with the Atla Group.
So David, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Great to be here and great to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. So perhaps let's set the scene a little bit up for our listeners and our viewers. Perhaps pre-PCD, just a bit of your background, because I think it's fascinating how you then pivoted into what you do now.
Sure. I trained as an accountant in London, working with a private client firm, went into private banking as a wealth planner, worked at an American and Swiss bank, was happily working away, helping clients with tax and wealth structuring issues, but always had a passion and love for networking and dealt a lot with intermediaries in the wealth sector. So PCD came out of that interest in marketing, networking within that professional services space.
And did you expect to get where it got today?
No, I mean, my wife still describes it as the hobby that got out of control. But yeah, it was something that I just started doing because I enjoyed bringing people together, creating value, unlocking opportunity. And then just from small acorns, I guess that's built over the last 10 years, really.
Yeah, okay. And then so digging into that PCD side of it, that network and that development, how have you seen that change for you, for your business model over those years?
Oh, it's changed hugely. I mean, when we started out, I was originally, when I was working for a Swiss bank, going to Geneva a lot. So my primary goal back in, say, 2014 was to go out and build networking events in Switzerland to build my brand. We were also doing events in the regions in the UK, so going up to Scotland quite a bit, Bristol and elsewhere, trying to bring value through our networking dinners, which bring together a mixture of private wealth professionals. And I suppose just through experiment and iteration, through going to different locations, seeing what works, and sometimes recognizing what didn't work and leaving that perhaps on the side and adding new locations, we were quite nimble in the sense of sponsors would approach me to say, we're interested in accessing this market or that. Are you able and interested to go to that place to organise an event? And this could be like over in Asia, in Africa, overseas. So quite ambitious places to go without much of a network. But we were confident and able and interested enough to go out and try and develop that and work with customers. And right up until the pandemic, we were just adding location after location. And that's the way we saw opportunity and growth. So by the time we got to 2019, we'd been to cities all around the world. We did about 40 dinners during the course of 2019. But then all that had to change, the following year. So yeah, the journey has been one of developing lots of new places, but then working out really where the value lies.
Yeah, refining that. Yeah,
refining it 100%.
So maybe before we just dig into that pivot of COVID, the culture side I'm interested in, because obviously you're dealing in different jurisdictions.
Yeah.
How that, again, from a small business or a medium-sized business that has culture within it to then doing that on a global scale, how do you find those challenges?
Yeah, I think that amongst professionals dealing with international high net worth clients, you can find a lot of commonality in those different markets, even if it's like in the Far East, in India, in African markets. They're often like, say, for example, the lawyers on the ground are like trained in London, came to university in London, have cultural connections. So there's a way for, I guess, business people working in this sector to come together and naturally find common ground. But I mean, I'm curious about the context in which people operate. And what I really find fascinating is looking at certain markets and saying, what are the forces here that drive business? So it's learning, it's going into a market like, for example, like the UAE and saying, right, what are the dynamics of this market? What are the regionally, where do the flows come? Which firms are where? What are they doing? You've got to go in with your ears open. You have to absorb it. You can't go in with a sort of a sales story about why what you're doing is great. You've got to basically try and soak up as much as you can, go on full listening mode, and then over time you'll gradually learn some of the trends and flows of those markets until a point where you feel like, yeah, I've actually got a handle on what happens here, and then importantly where you can create value.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. So we obviously, and I'm sure you deal with a lot of maybe not frontline entrepreneurs, but probably so just as much as they're trying to develop their business. So one of the fascinating stories, and I know we touched on it when we spoke a number of years ago, right in the middle of the pandemic, where it was all about getting 150 people in a room together, and that was the last thing allowed on the planet. And obviously you quickly had to pivot. So maybe just looking back in hindsight now, that for entrepreneurs listening, that change in direction, that moment COVID happened, is the panic in your mind? Is there, oh, holy, my business model is in trouble here. What do I do? What was going through your thoughts, and how did you approach that challenge?
Well, I guess we were caught squarely within it because, we had an international events program. We had sponsors contracted, venues contracted. I think that just from a commercial perspective, what saved us was having an annuity business model. So having membership where the timing of those membership payments had been, so we were, by the time the COVID pandemic hit in full, we were sat on a pot of income that was there to deliver events. And so our challenge at that point was just to simply show enough value to members to keep them interested and hopefully make them renew in 12 months' time. So it was, I suppose, from a business perspective, just you never know that left field event. And if you can kind of de-risk, diversify, have kind of income flows that you feel aren't going to be contingent on single events, and just work on some diversification or make sure.
And in that early stage of that, were you then not knowing super how tech savvy you were and going, can we pivot to doing digital stuff here? Do you have to rely on other people? Was that brainchild of the team you have now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my wife Sophie really got stuck into looking at all of the technology side, the webinars, how we can do that well. It brought a different skill set out in the team. It was essentially there, but we had to pull that to the fore, which was an interesting business challenge. But now it set us up for what was to come, developing more of those skills and bringing that out. So it was fortunately the team that we were a small team, but we could adapt to fulfill new roles. And I guess I just felt that I just had to step up as the leader of the business, just to give confidence to those employees that we're not going to the wall. We're doing stuff. We're moving forward. Stay with us. We've got an idea. We've got a vision here. It's not all lost, and we'll just keep on trucking.
Yeah. I see that. I was saying just before we came on air there about being in South Africa and seeing that entrepreneurial side of having to pivot when things aren't working in a country where they have their struggles and they've got constant change. That it's a great example, and I think this is similar. That great example where situations happen that could, quote, put you to the wall, but it's like having to pivot and change.
I think the resilience of entrepreneurs in challenging emerging market economies are, you've got to take your hat off, because they're battling against so many things like, whether it's currency or it's just in South Africa, obviously even the power and load shedding causes people to real stress when they're running their business. So no, anyone who can survive and thrive in that environment, they have to be really on top of their game to do so. So no, it's you hear some great stories of resilience when you meet people in that market and their advisors. But then there's lots of reasons to be cheerful, in a sense. If I speak to advisors in other complicated markets like Nigeria, where again there's a story of resilience and enterprise that is just really admirable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in regard to the networking, you get a good landscape of helicopter view of financial services and different areas of that. Kind of generally speaking, what trends are you seeing people talking about, challenges in the market?
I suppose in, say, financial services, London and the UK market, I suppose we're on a bit of it's a bit of a moribund economy at the moment, in a sense. There's so much uncertainty out there, a bit of doom and gloom. But those who are still thriving are into good niche markets elsewhere with the right teams and the right proposition and brand. So I think that even in difficult, climate, I think that the professional services players that are established in Europe, whether that's in London or here in the Isle of Man, Channel Islands or Switzerland, have got a resilience, to their business, but they need to have a geographical focus or, an offering, I think, to really to really survive and thrive. If you're not covering specialist markets where there's opportunity, then it's very difficult. You're really then just using the book you've got. If you're trying to create new opportunities, you need to have an angle on somewhere where there's a growth story. So a lot of people come to us in respect of, like, say, Saudi Arabia, because that's a market with a lot of cross-border investment, a lot of wealth creation at home that gets invested abroad. It's a great market for the wealth sector, but people want to know, okay, it's difficult, it's competitive, there's all sorts of nuance to it. How can we go out and find these international markets that we can sell our wares to? And that's common across the trust, banking world, taxes. People are based in London, but say looking for that global growth story. Where is it?
And maybe tying in then the value you bring in your network, and that's where you can help advise and then connect and network through that.
I think strategic partnerships in the sector are essential, and I think if they have a geographic angle as well, I think it's doubly good, because you can team up with a partner with complementary services and go to market together, and pool the contacts you've got, and when there's trust in that relationship, you can really do an awful lot together. And I've seen that work brilliantly over the years. And PCD is the sort of place where people can find partners. So it's it's a big room of a lot of people, but that's a jump off point for that building of trust and relationship that people can then use to specialize and go deeper and do all sorts of collaboration that can help unlock new clients and business.
Very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about that, maybe jumping off that cliff and that networking side of things. Let's go back 30 years, I suppose. Maybe networking was some contacts, go for a beer in a pub. And
people dread it. People dread the thought of, like, the cocktail, in the professional setting. It's almost like a number one fear, particularly for, like, say, legal, tax, accounting. It's not necessarily massive extroverts in that sector, but sensible people who need to socialize for business. Yeah. I'm just, I'm naturally a networker and socializer, but I want to try and make networking for those people more enjoyable.
Why do you think, from a psychology point of view, people are like that? I must say, I'm uncomfortable in going into those situations.
Yeah, I think it is hard to go into a room where you feel people are huddled talking. You don't necessarily know anyone. Often there's no one necessarily that. I always make a big point of being at or near the door at PCD to actually welcome people in, because I kind of feel that if you arrive, it's nice to have a friendly welcome. And also it's a great point for me then to go, oh, have you met Steve? Have you met Sarah? And sort of just get people involved in the conversation. But, I always sort of say to people that networking is not just about the stereotypical thought of the cocktail table and, the high table set up and walking into a room. You can do networking on your own terms. It's just about identifying relevant people and trying to create value together. So that can be done on a small scale, or it can be it's finding the right group, if it is a group, or, make it, I created PCD because what I wanted didn't exist. So people can go out and freestyle. But I just encourage people to think of networking as just trying to create value together. It's another form of socializing. It doesn't have to be scary,
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge, and certainly up and coming in career as well. Walking into a room full of unknown faces can be exceedingly.
But I guess also it's with certain groups, if you're going back to the same forum time and again, then you have the familiarity because there's less strain. You need in a group. So it can't go stale. So you don't want to be walking into the same room, but it's nice to have a blend of some familiar and then some new faces. Yeah, which is what we try and do with PCD, because we're doing international events, we naturally don't have the same 20 people meeting. It's naturally got a mix to it. But when the more people come and settle in, the more they tell me that they can relax because they become one of the names and faces around the club.
Yeah, interesting. So we touched on the pivot of the business in COVID, and again, I suppose I'd be interested to know your thoughts again, looking back over to this point in, I was going to say your career, but the development of it, how networking's changed from what used to be very face to face to now being a variety of content, I guess, and maybe where you see that going.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I'm really interested in this field because I think that the area of content is a great supplement to the face-to-face, and I think now when I started working as an accountant, LinkedIn was barely even going. 2005, 2008, I trained as an accountant, and there wasn't the same channels that are there, whereas now LinkedIn is a very active social media, channel where there's opportunity to be visible on the road, from your desk, giving people a little snapshot of what you're doing. And I think it's more scalable than you can't be out every night, or who wants to be, realistically. You want to go to the things that matter, but then in between, referrals are often, it's about being that first name in people's minds. It's really about a mixture of having the specialist skills, of course, but then beyond that, it's about being memorable and someone, that recall when they're sat with that client and they're having a conversation. It's like, I know the perfect person to help you with this. And that's just simply about being front of mind. So if you can be using all the levers of social media like LinkedIn, if you've got a newsletter, if you've got a mailer, on top of doing some good quality networking, I think those two things will help you build a brand. And I think the younger people coming through the sector definitely get that. And we run a next gen group now, which we've done for the last 2 years, where we're getting more associate level people coming through, but they're all much more keyed into social media and how they build a brand online,
Yeah, it's interesting, the brand comment, because when we talk about building one's own brand, maybe as the older generation, you kind of almost cringe of like it sounds like a corny thing, but I guess it's ultimately very important whether you're associated with a firm or not. Yeah. It's creating your own brand, which then because people do business, don't they?
But also, I mean, I think that if you look at the way that clients find advisors, I think that area is really changing as well, in the sense of, it's not credible to say that clients won't Google certain topics or find information about even private wealth subjects through their laptop or their phone. Mm-hmm. And, well, what is Google coming up with? Well, it's coming up with content searches. So if you've got content placed on credible media sources, whether it's your own website or third parties, but you've got a decent volume of the things that you should be talking about, you'll be found. And I think when you look at the way AI is changing search and how that works, well, really it's going to index to high quality content. So I think people coming through the profession now are going to need to think about how they build a rich, deep profile, not just like the LinkedIn with the headshot and the headline. Yeah. It's going to be more layers. It's going to be more nuanced and require a bit more development than the painting by numbers,
Yeah, no, it's interesting thinking about like the search SEOs, just much more advanced with the AI.
And that's just getting going. We're really on the foothills of that,
Yeah. How much, interestingly then, on AI in regards to the private client, how much, I mean, there's a lot of chatter and conversation. Are you seeing much implementation by perhaps firms with, let's say, deeper pockets who perhaps can advance further in that area? Are you seeing...
I think on the marketing front, I think where it's really interesting, it's where we use tools which will help us start to create copy and blog posts, for example, with a good, which are SEO optimized, which take you away from the blank piece of paper. Now, it's not that you put something into one of these AI tools and you post exactly what it says, because often, but it actually, what's great about it gets you moving. So I think younger people as well coming through universities and education also know intuitively these AI tools and how they're used and how that they can just turbocharge and unlock something that just makes your team more productive, So I think I've seen it in the marketing arena, but I've recently been talking to other people about just general business processes. So how can you unlock the power of AI to just look at different areas of business as well? So I think there's huge, professional services is ripe for some disruption around that, and we'll see how far it goes. But then the challenge for professional advisors is going to be to come back, what's the core value? Actually, the core value is, independent advice, knowing the client, being able to have that relationship, the trust, these principles of judgment and guidance and relationship are going to be the mainstay.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But everything around providing efficiencies or support, I guess.
So advisors are going to have to also, naturally with everything, they have to adapt how they deliver what they do. But these tools shouldn't be a threat. They should augment and make more productive, I think, the teams that are there using them.
Yeah, indeed. So switching subjects again slightly, let's talk a little bit about ESG. It's been talked about in the financial services community for an extended period of time. I'm a big believer where we are here, and our business, as all business, have a good amount of community and global responsibility to reduce not only to reduce its footprint, but to set an example around that. And I know there's certain sectors also looking at ensuring their clients invest accordance with ESG and the policy and procedure around that. And I just wonder, I felt initially when a sector was talked about, it was almost a wish list thing. And I see more and more now, and certainly the younger generation, that's how they want to invest. They want to invest socially and be socially responsible. I'm just interested to see how you've seen that interact with PCD or not, as the case may be, over the years, and the providers, and whether there's maybe let's not say less talk, but there's more action than.
Yeah, I mean, we did a really fascinating panel event in New York back in October where we had an international perspective on sustainable investing in ESG. We had Rennie Hoare, who's a partner from Hoare's Bank in London and is the partner responsible for philanthropy, very passionate and interested in impact investing as well and looking at that spectrum. We had also 2 wealth managers from New York and an environmental consultant who's worked a lot with banks and financial services. And we were talking about, where are we at with how clients view this area and also just the international perspective on it. So an interesting twist on it is in the US, almost like the ESG term has become politicized. Okay. So now it's you've got certain states that are kind of almost like outlawing ESG style investment, and others, California, say, going all in on it. So it's almost become divided just in terms of terminology. But I think definitely more firms are responding to demand from younger clients to invest. It ties into the conversation around purpose. I think with clients, with ultra high net worth clients, they've got more money than they could ever spend. What you're trying to bring to them then, advisors, is how are you going to protect them from their wealth? How are their children going to live with purpose, with meaning? And I think that they're looking at the way they invest. And if they're doing, say, philanthropic or good works elsewhere, it's inconsistent to have then their main portfolio in all sorts of bad investments. So I think that it's a natural evolution in the sector. I think more wealth managers now are looking at things like measuring against the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and that's an innovation. It wasn't something that you saw. But I think there's slow progress, but I think there is demand from the client base, and that's what we'll tell in the future. I mean, the difficulty has been in the last couple of years in markets, ESG portfolios have performed significantly worse sometimes than more balanced portfolios which contained those sectors that would be excluded. So that's really a bit of an acid test, because it's fine to say that you're committed to these areas, but when you're making a lot less money, that's when people, right, okay. So I'm interested in it, I watch it, and I look at what I'm interested in as well is this international differences. What are people doing in Switzerland or UK or US or Asia? And how those...
And I presume there are different dynamics in that.
Absolutely. I mean, the Swiss have really... been leading on like ESG and impact. The wealth managers and banks there are really, I think, in the vanguard. UK does well, and then, like I say, in the US, there's obviously a huge culture for philanthropy, but then there's this skepticism and politicization about investing for impact and doing good like that. So it's a nuanced picture.
Okay, and then if we maybe we talked again just before we came on. I spoke to Andy Wood yesterday. I know he's a big supporter of the club as well, and being with you. So that let's call it that blockchain and crypto space, maybe applying that same question around ESG. And again, it was something 6 years ago this is going to revolutionize the world. I'm sure it will. And are you starting to see more momentum around the implementation of those things?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, again, I think the international comparisons quite interesting. I think there's certain markets like Dubai, if you look at the way that they brought in a regulator, VARA, like very rapidly are now aggregating a lot of firms globally who want a light touch, low tax environment with a lot of the key players physically in the market, and obviously a lot of investors and wealth nearby ready to support projects. I think that's been very interesting because in order for crypto digital assets to become more mainstream, the regulatory piece is essential. I mean, and the fact that now that we've seen the launch of ETFs, of mainstream financial products that will allow regular investors to own these assets in a more straightforward way, I think is the start of the development of the market. Once you see institutional investors coming in, the big fund managers setting up funds holding these assets, I think we'll start to see I suppose, more confidence in that market. And but certainly, I think those who have, there's believers in crypto. There's those hardcore evangelists. There are those who've come on and made money out of it. Then the question is, as I suppose, is how do they also then get those proceeds into the mainstream, financial, into real assets? It's. I think that it's the pace of evolution is very interesting. I think the fact that we've bounced back after crypto winter and continue to evolve will mean that professionals, I think, who invest some time in understanding the sector, I mean, it's a bit of a bet, isn't it? It's like, how much time and resources do you put into trying to master an asset class that is higher risk or is more complex? But I think those who maybe do put a side bet on that will do well. I've seen certain, particularly in the fiduciary sector, trying to get to grips with it, and well, they'll wait and see whether it pays off. Really,
trying to adopt it early with the hope it picks up.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about. And you mentioned funny enough about countries, and I don't want to sit on a podcast and talk about how great the Isle of Man is compared to other jurisdictions. In fact, I think it's always important for a jurisdiction to look in a mirror and then look at its competitors and see how it's competing. And the Isle of Man, its initiatives, I do believe the government and the initiatives within the finance department are a really important part of developing the jurisdiction or keeping it at the front and center of minds. When you look at other jurisdictions, you're obviously going into these, you mentioned about Dubai moving quickly to bring in regulation. What are you seeing, or what, if you pick jurisdiction, I'm not saying pick the Isle of Man by any stretch, what jurisdictions stand out going, they're being agile, they're being quick, they're adapting, they're thinking on their feet?
Well, I guess the flip on being agile is that you can move into areas that then you get caught out on.
Tripped up.
So I get why, particularly say in the crypto and digital space, you can see people can easily get caught out by trying to welcome business that they
ends up biting them.
Ends up biting them. So I get why governments have to be prudent in how they bring in regulation. But I think, the Isle of Man does do a good job in engaging externally. Michael Crowe and the team have been great backers of us. We've been out and done lots of events in London, Manchester, Switzerland, Dubai, because you do have to get on the front line with the advisors and learn from them as to where they're seeing opportunity. I think the thing that does strike me about Isle of Man is there is a willingness to have that conversation. So you can get a conversation with government, work out, okay, if it's in the insurance sector or fintech or financial services or any sector, the door's open. And that's good, because that isn't the case everywhere. And sometimes these agencies are run quite politically. So, it can be difficult. The agenda of the leader of that organization is not like, say, for example, to come and work with us to really find opportunities. So I think that the challenge, I suppose, for any island economy is it's a big world out there. You've got to focus where you pick your battles and focus on territories where there's opportunity. I think, Isle of Man does well with SA because in South Africa there's great links and ties already that you can leverage. You can't be everywhere at once. So it's a case of trying to work out for your proposition what makes sense. But I would say that, you're more out there than others that I see, and trying to grab opportunities where you can in a prudent way.
So I think just three more things I'd like to cover off, or four more actually. So interestingly, just travel. So with business, it takes its toll, travel, and I think having been away recently, it's not fun. How do you manage that on a?
Well, so I live in Brighton, and for certain runs of the year, we're just in Brighton. And then if I'm not there, I'm on the road traveling. And I go into London once a month, once every 6 weeks. So sometimes I do a lot of travel, but there's a perception that because we're posting about something, like say this week, next week we'll be posting about something which has happened and been recorded, months ago. There's this sense of being here, there, and everywhere, which is by design, really, because it sort of tries to create that excitement and momentum. But I tend to find that I like the traveling because I like meeting people and learning stuff about what's going on in different places. There's no replacement for getting out there and sussing out what's happening, learning and listening to people. So I quite like, although travel is tiring, I like the contrast of when I'm in Brighton, it's quite relaxed. And when I'm on the road, I can go out and meet people and then come back to base and, reset and go again. So, yeah.
Is it nice to get home?
Yeah, definitely. I've got an 8-year-old son and 12-year-old daughter. They see me and my wife Sophie, working hard in the business, but they can see that I enjoy what I do, so they wouldn't get a sense that, oh, Dad's just grinding away in a job that he hates. Do you know what I mean? They see that we're trying to make something happen and we're in control of that. Although you'd always want things to be bigger and brighter and more successful, you're on a journey. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and it's, I guess, a good message for the children, isn't it? As well, you can find a job you enjoy and work.
Be passionate. Don't be miserable. There was an old colleague of mine that used to always say, "Life's not a rehearsal." Don't. It's one take on this. And if you don't grind away in a bank for your career, liking networking, and not try and.
Do you think that maybe that same was rumbling through your head when you were thinking about PCD?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that opportunities only come on at certain points, and there's things are live at a certain point, and you can't redo things anyway. So you've just got to follow your gut, I think. And if you can go out and grab an opportunity, well, I think you've got to. I don't know. There's many ways to live a life.
Indeed. So just one maybe more in-depth question around the club. So one of the observations I make, and I think it's interesting to chat about, is you if we put it in its most clinical format, you create a room and you often put 10 competitors in the same room.
Yeah.
And that willingness for those businesses to step in the same room with a competitor. And it's clearly not a bum fight, but everyone's trying to network and develop business. So to be able to do that, there's a certain sparkle to create that community that everyone wants to walk in the room and is comfortable in that environment. So there's a community, there's a team aspect of that I think if you look at how it's structured cold, it's kind of like, well, that won't work. But clearly it does. So how do you think you create that environment where people are comfortable, where fiduciaries will sit together, sit on the same table, and not feel that there's this competitive environment?
Yeah, I think that people see me as a first mover. I'm there to help people. My whole approach with networking has always been not to try and ask for something first, but to try and create something first. So when you set that as a culture from the top, it means that people get that what this networking group is all about. I many years ago went along to a BNI meeting. I don't know if you know BNI, but it's like a global franchise of small networks. It's grown globally, and the amazing thing that they do at BNI is that they meet weekly and reward the person who gives out the most business. So it's not like a sales group where, this guy's done the top sales. It's like this guy is to be celebrated because he gave out the most business. Okay. So, culturally, that's quite interesting. It's something I took away. I thought, if you can kind of inspire people to come into a room yes, they will see competitors, but the bigger picture is, and particularly like, say, the event last night, we had 150 guests at the Commis. We had lots of, of off-island people, probably 60% local, 40% international. There's always ways to find that. I think that's our secret, is that all the places we go, we're always bringing a lot of international contingent. And that dilutes this sense of, if I came to the Isle of Man and I got 20 fiduciaries around the table and I maybe sprinkled in 4 or 5 tax advisors, that wouldn't be comfortable. It's comfortable because we've got that scale, we've got enough numbers, and we've also, the people want to be there, because now we've built to a point of momentum. Essentially, if an individual decides not to be there, well, actually they're missing out. You go in a tipping point with an event where early backers, okay, you're grateful for them to come out, but it gets to a point where people look at the list and think, I should be in that room, because if I'm not, the people who are coming in to meet local professionals, you're missing a trick. So, but we do put a lot of effort into the table plans as well, to try and what we try and avoid at all costs is competitors seated next to each other. So it doesn't matter if on a table of 10 you've got 3 rough competitors, because you've got 7 people where there's opportunity. So it does need careful construction. But we fortunately have now built the format so people know what to expect. They know what they get with it. They enjoy it. And we move on with it.
So we're sat here talking on a podcast as well as video, but you've got your own podcast. Talk a little bit about that. What's the...
So we've been thinking about launching a podcast for some time, and we've launched one called PCD Cast, which we started at the start of the year. It's about marketing and business development ideas for professionals. So it's partly done by me and the team. So we wanted to have a regular channel through which we could talk about. People often phone me up or ask me about, like, whether it's things like on social media, like, LinkedIn, how can you get more out of LinkedIn? Or, we love the video you make. How do you go about? Or Chris, our cameraman, gets asked, what kit do you use when you do that? And there seemed to be an opportunity to do a podcast around that, because on one sense, we've done a lot of interviews of our members over the years. So a fairly straightforward, like, you're a tax advisor in Jersey, let's have a chat about that, which is fine, but it's not scintillating content. And actually, you almost think, does it even fill a need? Whereas I kind of feel with a podcast like PCD Cast it's filling a little gap in the market for me to share some ideas about marketing and business development with professionals. And we're also getting external guests. One area that we find interesting on external guests is people who can help you understand certain markets. So I did a podcast with a business consultant in Saudi Arabia, an American lady based there, who helps people understand, like, the business culture and the ways of doing business. I've just recorded one with a guy out in Singapore. There's opportunity to, like, sort of remote record podcasts with people in different markets, and just bringing that home to our listener base, just saying, did you know actually in Singapore, the family office growth of the family office market has gone from, 500 to 2,000 in this, just bringing little nuggets, and then someone bring that to the table. And it's not about, we're not about drowning people in technical information. It's about commercial ideas. And it's like, have you thought about this or that?
Interesting.
And I think so we'll see how we go with it, but we've got off to a good start with it. We've got some interesting guests coming on. And also, when I was in South Africa, we recorded one on the road. So I was actually entrusted by setting up the microphone, which is normally beyond my pay grade, but setting up the mics, having the kit. So that was quite exciting, because I think to be able to go into another place to get a podcast with good sound, but off microphone and a record, I had all the kit with me, but it was portable enough to, just set up in a hotel. So I think that's got major potential, because I'm doing all this traveling, the opportunity to... One of the things about doing video is it's difficult, and you need a very specific setup. Whereas if we can start to develop a mode of podcast that could also be mainly in the studio, but also specials from, if I go down to Lisbon, can I do a few interviews with people down there about the market opportunity? I think that then that really adds some value, So we took some time to get something on the ground, off the ground, podcast wise, but now we're doing it. I think we're really finding our feet with it.
And people find that on the Apple Store, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Spotify, perfect.
Obviously on your social media channels.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just to finish off, books, learnings. What do you?
I'm reading a fascinating book at the moment that is about the super tall residential properties of New York and how they developed, the story of how they were financed and built through the course of the 2010s. What I quite like is, like, sort of, you get more and more books from FT journalists who do an expose or a deep dive around a certain sector. And I find, like places like New York, which I've been recently and done an event, and, dynamic, interesting markets, you can just jump into an ebook and sort of, I like the way that they all tell the story through the personalities, but then it also relates back to our sector, because it'll be talking about family offices or the banks who are lending, so it's sort of like it's a bit of a busman's holiday, but at the same time it's written in an engaging style. So and I often then find that if you're reading broadly in the wealth sector on these kind of what are, it is entertainment, but it gives you just those layers of interest and insight as to how things develop. But no, I haven't really got into the sort of the self-help books. Maybe I should, but I like the commentary on political and economic scene, because I always think that just adds something to your conversations in the sector,
No, absolutely. Well, really insightful conversation. I appreciate you coming in, David, and congratulations on the event yesterday.
Super to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for listening, everyone.